Regular bread today. This recipe is very versatile. You can do many different things with it. So I'll explain some of those differences you can make. But we're going to start with 1 tablespoon of our yeast and get your 2.5 cups of warm water in right away. You'll need to do this so that your yeast can start working. This is just instant quick rise yeast. So I'm just going to get that in there. And we're going to add 1/4 cup of sugar and 1/4 cup of shortening or butter or lard, some kind of a fat you want to have in there. And we need to have a little bit of salt. So this is going to make 2 loaves of bread. So we've got 2 teaspoons of salt. And we just throw everything in the mixer and then we'll turn it on. And this recipe calls for 6 cups of flour. I always start with 5. You don't want to put too much flour in right away. You don't want your dough to get too heavy. And this is the part that I like the best. You can make white bread, whole wheat. You can make bread with all those grains in it. And this is where you decide to do that. So today I'm going to do half whole wheat and half white flour. So I've got 2.5 cups of my whole wheat and 2.5 cups of white. If you want that 12 grain bread, or the one with all the seeds, you can buy, I think there's 7 grain cereal, 12 grain cereal. There's all sorts of different ones out there, or that it's called Red River cereal. You get it in a box in the cereal aisle. You can use that. There's all those different seeds and grains, but whatever you put in, so if you would put 1/2 cup of those grains in here, do 1/2 cup less of flour to start, to make sure that your dough doesn't get too heavy. So this is a time when you can decide what type of bread you want to make. So today we're doing half whole wheat, half white. You can do all whole wheat, doesn't matter. So we've got our yeast, our water, sugar, shortening, salt, and our 5 cups of flour. We're going to get this mixing. And always just put your mixer on low, and you want the dough to start to come together. I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. It's been about 2 minutes. It's just slow going here. The bowl is not clean around the edges, so I am going to add a little bit more flour. I do find I usually do about 5.5 cups with this recipe. You don't want that dough to get too heavy. So just add a little bit at a time. You don't want to overdo it. And I'm going to let this mix for a couple more minutes, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so the dough has been mixing for a little bit. You can see the sides of my bowl have come nice and clean. So we're going to stop our mixer now. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like and feels like. So you don't want to over mix your dough. This one here, if I touch my dough, it feels a little tacky, but it's not coming off of my hands. My fingers are staying clean. If it was really wet yet, you would definitely get your fingers would have dough stuck to them, and we don't want to have that. This one here, just touch it, your fingers come clean, you're good. You don't want it so dry that this feels really, it feels dry. It's smooth and hard to explain, but you don't want it to be too dry because then your dough is heavy. So we're going to cover this, let it rise for an hour, and then so that way it can double up in size. We don't want to overwork the dough. There's always these people who like to overwork their dough. Like the old method seems to be that you gotta slap that dough around and like really knead it hard. If you have a mixer, your mixer's doing all your work. In 5 minutes, your dough is mixed up perfectly. You don't have to do all that angry work on your dough. Unless you're angry, maybe you want to, but you don't have to do that. I actually find if you're a bit more gentle with your dough, it's a bit fluffier and it's a nicer bread in the end. So we're gonna let this rise now for 1 hour. All right, so our dough has been rising for an hour, nice and fluffy. So we'll just get this out of our pot. And we're going to make 2 loaves out of this. So we're going to divide this into half. And you don't need to overwork this dough. We're going to just roll it out a little bit. I'm using half whole wheat and half white, so there's not going to be very many air pockets in here. If you have white bread, it tends to have a lot more air pockets in it. But I don't really see or hear any air pockets. So I'll roll out my dough and I'll also lift it off the counter again, because this is my side that's not as sticky because I've stretched it. This side's a little tacky, so I just want to get that off my counter, and I'll flip it over. We're just going to roll this up. And you don't want to just leave it like this because the ends don't look good and it's not all nice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stretch the top of the dough. So we're going to bring our sides in and we're going to go roll our dough over and we're going to stretch the dough. So you want to keep your hands on the counter but put pressure on your loaf so that you're stretching the top of the dough. So it's going to stretch nice all the way around. Get those ends in. And we're stretching the dough. So you're going to just do this a few times so that you can see it's getting nice and smooth on the top, because you want to have that nice smooth top on your loaf. So what you're doing is you're making all your seam come down to the bottom and having it nice and smooth. So my dough is perfect texture. It's a little tacky, so it's gripping the counter to stretch it, but I'm not adding any extra flour to my counter. If I add flour to my counter, then this is just going to slide on my counter and it's not going to grip the counter. So you just want to stretch and roll, and you're going to put this into a greased loaf pan. And I'll usually just flatten that down so it's even. So I'll do that one more time. So right now, because this has just been sitting for a minute, this is feels dry and this feels really tacky. So I'm going to just put the tacky side down first. I'm just going to do a bit of a roll here. Actually I have no air bubbles in this one at all. And I just want to lift it up so it's not sticking to the counter. Flip it over and just roll this up. And you're going to make sure you get your ends in. And we're rolling back, and you can see the dough is stretching when you do that. So keep your hands on the counter, put pressure on your loaf and push back so that it's stretching your dough around. So you're just going to do this a few times so you get that seam on the bottom. And this dough is nice and elastic, so it's not going to just break on you. So you're going to get this nice smooth top on your loaf. And just make sure when you put it in the loaf pan that the seam side goes down. So we're going to put this in here, and we're going to cover these, and we're going to let them rise for an hour. So at about the 45-minute mark, we're going to preheat the oven to 375 degrees, and then we can get them in the oven. So I'll show you what that looks like in an hour. All right, my loaf is ready to go in the oven. As you can see, there's a nice rise on that. So it's over the top of the pan. I'm going to put this in the oven for 30 minutes, and we'll see how that looks. So 375 degrees for 30 minutes. It's out of the oven, and if you want to know if your bread is done, you can also check. It should just come out of the pan if you've greased it nice. So you want the bottom of your loaf to be nice and golden brown. If it's still white, you need to put it in for probably another 5 minutes or so. It has to be nice and golden on the bottom, and you don't want it to be doughy. My loaves are a little bit uneven in size. I should have weighed them. You know what? Sometimes you're going to get a few duds. Sometimes you're going to get some beautiful bread. Just keep at it. It's all okay. None of us are perfect. I also wanted to just mention, if you have a local grocery store or like a place where you can buy your fruits and vegetables, so here in Chilliwack we have Hofstede's Country Barn, they'll sell me these nice bags. So they'll sell me a whole roll. I think I paid $19 or $20 for it. This will last for a long time. Rather than buying little bread bags, it gets very expensive. So I use this for all my bread. So let your bread cool completely. Put it in the bag. This bread freezes great, and you just take it out when you need it. So give it a try. Got my recipe down here. Don't forget, you can change it up. You can do white bread, whole wheat, half and half, add in your seeds. Just have fun with it. It's delicious bread.